There is an insect alive right now, somewhere over the plains of North America, flying toward a forest it has never seen, in a country it has never visited, following a route that no member of its family has flown in nearly a year. It will not stop to ask for directions. It has no map. It has no GPS. Its brain is smaller than a grain of rice. And yet, in the next few weeks, it will cross nearly 4,000 kilometers of mountains, deserts, and open sky, and land, almost impossibly, in the exact same patch of forest its great-great-grandparents left the spring before. How is that even possible? I'm Nathan Wild, and for years I've been chasing stories like this one, stories that live in the smallest, most overlooked corners of the natural world. Somewhere between the wing beats of a butterfly and the canopy of a Mexican fir forest, there's a mystery that scientists are still only beginning to understand. And honestly, the more I dig into it, the less it feels like biology, and the more it feels like magic we just haven't fully explained yet. This is the story of the monarch butterfly and the impossible journey written into its wings. Let's start with the obvious question. 4,000 kilometers is not a small distance. It's roughly the same as flying from Madrid to Moscow. Now imagine doing that without wings made of metal, without an engine, without a single drop of fuel, powered only by a few sips of nectar and the wind currents drifting south. Every autumn, millions of monarch butterflies living across southern Canada and the northern United States sense something shifting. The days grow shorter, the air turns cooler, and almost in unison, they begin to move, drifting toward Mexico in a living orange river that scientists have tracked for decades.
But here's where the story stops being simple. The monarchs that complete this journey are not the same individuals who started it the year before. In fact, they're not even the children of those butterflies. They're the great-grandchildren, sometimes the great-great-grandchildren. Let that sit for a second. A monarch born in July might live for only a few weeks, just long enough to mate and lay eggs before dying. Its offspring repeats that same short cycle, and the offspring after that, generation after generation, living fast, dying young, until suddenly one generation is born different. Triggered by shortening daylight and dropping temperatures, something extraordinary happens inside these butterflies. Their reproductive systems essentially pause. Their bodies divert all that saved energy towards something else entirely: survival, endurance, distance. And instead of living for 2 or 3 weeks like their parents, they can live for up to 8 months. This single generation is the one that will fly the entire distance to Mexico, survive the winter clinging to Oyamel fir trees in dense, silent mountain forests, and then, when spring arrives, begin the journey back north. None of them have ever been to Mexico before. None of them will ever make the full round trip themselves. They'll travel partway north, lay eggs, and die, passing the journey forward like a relay race that spans an entire continent. So when that first butterfly lands on that exact patch of forest in Michoacan, it's not returning home. It's arriving somewhere it has never physically been, guided by directions it was never taught. And that's the part that still leaves scientists scratching their heads.
Before we get to how they actually find their way, I want to take you back a few decades, because the discovery of where monarchs were even going is one of the great detective stories in the history of natural science. For most of the 20th century, nobody knew where North American monarchs disappeared to every winter. They simply vanished. A Canadian zoologist named Fred Urquhart became obsessed with the question, and alongside his wife Nora, he spent over 30 years gluing tiny paper tags onto the wings of monarchs, recruiting thousands of volunteers across the continent to help track them. It wasn't until 1975, after decades of dead ends, that a volunteer named Kenneth Brugger, working with a local resident named Catalina Aguado in central Mexico, finally located the answer. Mountainsides so densely covered in overwintering monarchs that entire fir trees appeared to be dripping orange, the branches bending under the sheer weight of millions of resting butterflies. I've seen photographs of that forest, and even now, decades later, they're hard to process. Trees that look like they're made of butterflies. Silence, except for the occasional snap of a branch giving way under their weight. Personally, I find it almost unbelievable that something this enormous, this beautiful, went completely unnoticed by science for so long, hiding in plain sight in a mountain forest.
But finding the destination only deepened the real mystery. How were they finding it at all? Before we go further into that, if stories like this one, about creatures doing the seemingly impossible, are the kind of thing that pulls you in, this is exactly the kind of expedition I want to keep taking you on.
Sticking around and following along means you won't miss the next journey into the hidden world of small creatures doing extraordinary things. Now, back to the mystery. For a long time, the leading theory was that monarchs simply used the sun as a compass, flying based on its position in the sky, the same way ancient sailors once navigated by the stars. And that theory turned out to be partly true, but it had a serious flaw. The sun doesn't stay still. It moves across the sky throughout the day. If a butterfly just flew directly toward the sun's position, it would end up traveling in a curve, not a straight line south. So either monarchs were terrible navigators with spectacular luck, or something else was compensating for that movement. The answer turned out to be hiding somewhere nobody expected, inside their antennae. Researchers at the University of Massachusetts, led by neuroscientist Stephen Reppert, discovered something I still find genuinely astonishing. Monarch butterflies carry a built-in circadian clock, not just in their brain, but specifically in their antennae. This internal clock allows them to track the time of day and constantly recalculate the sun's shifting position, adjusting their flight path in real time to stay locked onto a southwest heading. In other words, their antennae aren't just for smelling or touching the world around them. They're functioning as a built-in compass and a wristwatch fused together, running silently every single day of a journey. And that still isn't the whole story. On cloudy days, when the sun disappears completely, monarchs don't simply lose their way.
Some evidence suggests they may also be sensing the Earth's magnetic field, using specialized light-sensitive proteins called cryptochromes, essentially giving them a backup navigation system in case their primary one goes dark. Scientists are still actively studying exactly how strong or how precise this magnetic sense really is. It's one of those areas where the research keeps evolving, and I'll admit that uncertainty is part of what makes it so exciting to follow. Think about what that means. A sun compass, corrected by an internal clock living in its antennae, possibly backed up by a magnetic sense most humans will never personally experience, all packed into a brain smaller than a sesame seed. Sincerely, this might be one of the most extraordinary navigation systems I've ever come across in nature, and it belongs to an insect most people only notice for being pretty. But here's the moment that for me takes this whole story to another level entirely. The butterfly that begins this journey in Canada will never finish it. It dies somewhere along the way north, after laying eggs that will hatch into the next link in the chain, which means the knowledge of exactly where to go, the precise mountain, the precise forest, sometimes the precise trees, cannot be something any individual monarch learns through experience. It has to be inherited. Somehow, encoded into the genetics of this species, there is a kind of map, not memorized, but built into the architecture of the insect itself. And right now, scientists genuinely do not fully understand how that information is stored, or how it's passed so precisely from one generation to the next, skipping over individuals who will personally never see Mexico in their lives.
The more I learn about cases like this, the more convinced I become that nature's imagination has very few limits. We are talking about generational memory written not in a notebook, not in a brain, but somewhere in the biochemistry of an animal that lives, on average, for about a month. Sadly, this entire system is now under serious threat. The Oyamal fir forests in Mexico, where monarchs overwinter, have been shrinking due to illegal logging and land conversion. Meanwhile, across the United States, milkweed, the only plant monarch caterpillars can eat, has been disappearing due to herbicide use and agricultural expansion. Monarch population counts in their wintering grounds have dropped dramatically over the past few decades compared to historical highs. It's a strange thing to realize that one of the most sophisticated navigation systems on the planet might disappear, not because it failed, but because the world underneath it changed too quickly for evolution to keep up. Personally, I find that thought hard to shake. a creature that solved long-distance navigation millions of years before humans invented the compass, the sextant, or the satellite, and we may lose it not to a predator, but to a parking lot where a milkweed field used to be. If there's one thing I hope you take from this journey with me, it's this. The next time a small orange and black butterfly drifts past you in late summer, you're not just looking at an insect passing through your garden. You might be looking at one single link in a 4,000-kilometer relay race that has been running generation after generation since long before either of us existed, carrying directions that were never written down, never taught, and somehow never forgotten. Many people overlook something this small.
But the closer you look, the harder it becomes to see it as just a butterfly ever again. If this kind of impossible journey fascinated you, you'll want to come with me on the next expedition, into the underground cities built by ants that function with the complexity of an entire civilization hidden just beneath the ground you walk on every day. That story is waiting, and honestly, it might be even harder to believe than this one. I'm Nathan Wild, and this is only the beginning of what's hiding in plain sight.